Hi, this is Curt and welcome to another edition of Fire Law Roundup. Take us away.
Okay, so let's start North Carolina. Fairly simple thing, but I want to kind of point out. So there's a, I'm going to say hearing impaired, even though we've heard of them as deaf. He's a hearing impaired firefighter. He needs to take an EMT test for his career or to try to, get a job, to be eligible for a career position. He's failed it on multiple times. The Office of Emergency Services had given him a lot of accommodations, but they refused to read the exam to him out of security issues. They didn't want everyone else to hear. I don't know what they would hear. They're only reading the test questions, but nonetheless, they've have to now agree. The state, North Carolina Office of Emergency Services or Medical Services has to agree to read him the examination. And that's why I said he's hearing impaired, not deaf. He has cochlear implants. In any event, that's how he learns better. This is, I'm going to tell you what the interesting is. I've had this. There's no question the state has to do these. They have to accommodate or read the exam. I'm surprised it got this far. They agreed to read the exam, but then they got to pay $53,000 in attorney's fees, right? Which we do because they get attorney's fees because otherwise there's no money in these. Most of these people can't afford to pay the attorneys to represent their interests. So a lot of statutes like this grants attorney's fees, as we've seen. The issue is going to be, and not to get off this tangent, he's going to pass the exam, let's hope, let's assume, and then he's not going to get hired because he maybe can't do the job and there's no way to reasonably accommodate, perhaps, I'm making this up, I don't know, perhaps the fact that he's hearing impaired. Again, maybe he can read lips, maybe he does have cochlear implants, but that's not perfect hearing, that's just sound recognition. But the interesting thing he's going to raise is, hey, I'm an EMT, I've got the certification, I passed the test, that means you can hire me. And those are not the same things. I want to make clear to everybody watching, right?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of interesting parts. One thing about this case is we could not get the court documents, so we don't have a lot of the original information. What we've got is secondhand information from the newspapers, local papers. And one of the things that you'll find out there is some mistakes in who was involved in this. They said the North Carolina Office of Emergency Management, which Office of Emergency Management has nothing to do with EMS. This is the North Carolina Office of Emergency Medical Services, which is part of their Department of Health. So that was sort of one thing, and kind of frustrating. I noticed as I was trying to study and figure out what happened here, I go from website to website to website to website, including some very well-known websites in the fire service, and all they did was cut and paste. You would think someone who is in this industry would say, wait a minute, that's not an EMA function, and actually get to the truth. So I did find one source, the Winston-Salem Journal, that did a pretty good job of it, and I put a lot of that information in there. And I think you're right, we've got that essential function, but the point being, and I see this often, is people try to put a barrier in front of someone like this. And there may be barriers further down the road, but you can't put up your barrier to say, well, you're not going to get past the next barrier, right. And one last thing, as an accommodation, I was thinking about this, like because my department, we would accept someone who's deaf. That's not a problem. But how do we communicate? And in particular, how do we communicate, get out of the building? It's, evacuation time. And there may be some technologies that may be brought to bear there. So I wouldn't want to say that there's absolutely no accommodation, but I think
I know a deaf firefighter who's.
Yeah, but I think as far as an EMT goes, now this firefighter with his implants, he must be able to hear. Obviously, he wants to have a reader. Okay. So I don't think you're going to have a problem assessing a patient. But I think if someone didn't have that capability and they were deaf and they didn't have some sort of capability, how are you going to interact? You can't. It's one thing to say a state government has to accommodate someone. If I need sign language, you have to learn sign language. I think that's one thing. Well, that's if it's a state industry, a state
Right.
office. Or,
They can provide an interpreter.
right. But it's a different thing to say every patient out there
Right.
is going to have to. So
Right.